Hey everyone, welcome to the Father, Spirit, Son episode 133. Today we're going to continue our journey through Ecclesiastes chapter 4. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4 verses 1 through 8 we talked about the oppression of people, how it doesn't appear to bring justice in this life sometimes when some are oppressed and there doesn't seem to be an adequate resolution to seek that justice. There was also the idea of how there has to be a work-life balance. So if you have excess idleness in your life, like you're not doing a lot, or you're basically being lazy, that's one extreme, and the other extreme is to be basically like a workaholic and work yourself to an early grave for no apparent reason, and that's another extreme. And so finding somewhere in the middle to land is the prudent thing. And so today we're going to continue with verses 9 through 16. This is the New King James Version, by the way, and we're going to get started right now. It says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor." This is clearly demonstrating to us that when we don't have someone to share life with, to do life with, so to speak, we definitely need to consider that there might be a sense of emptiness in the reward of labor. When you just see it for yourself, and you see that you've accomplished something, it's all that much more meaningful when you have somebody there by your side to say, "Hey, look what we did together," or "Look what I was able to do for us." You know, there's a sentiment there that is very special, and it's a critical part of life. So far we know that. Verse 9 says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor." Let's see what verse 10 elaborates on. So 10 says, "For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up." So when you're alone, this is clearly telling us that it's a bigger struggle when there's setbacks, when there's failures, when you literally fall. Who's going to be there to pick you up, to grab hold of you when there's an emergency? Who's going to help you out? And this is not necessarily saying that it has to be a romantic companion or that it has to be a spouse, but it is saying that you should have, like, maybe a brother, maybe it's a family member, someone in your life that is there for you through thick and thin, that those maybe 2 or 3 people in their life, if you're lucky, that you can call at the middle of the night and they'll answer it and they'll do whatever they can to help you. And so it's definitely important to balance your life, and also to have somebody like that in your life, because without somebody like that, life is a lot more intimidating. You don't want to fail, and you don't want to fall down when you don't have anyone around you to help you out. So we go ahead, in verse 11 it says, "Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone?" So this is further emphasizing the point that solitude has some limitations, in the sense that, well, literally you cannot keep warm. If it's cold and the weather's cold, you're trying to find a warmth by yourself in your bed. It's more difficult than if you have a spouse, or in the old times I believe they used to sleep together like a family, just to keep warm together. And so it's definitely more imagery there, more concrete, just emphasizing the fact that solitude definitely has its flaws. It has its benefits as well, but this is talking about the value of friendship, the value of companionship. So we're seeing that picture growing here. Verse 12 furthers this. It says, "Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken." I've heard this verse mentioned in some wedding ceremonies, and it's very cool to think of that threefold cord not quickly broken. You have, you, your spouse, and God. That's the ideal strand that, it's very, very difficult to break. Notice it doesn't say impossible, but it's definitely difficult to break. So it's something that we need to contemplate, that we need to keep in our minds, that life gets hard. And so when you have somebody with you, when you have God on your side, it just makes it more manageable. And even when the toughest times come, you sense that inner joy, that inner peace and strength that God gives us in his joy, and with the blessing of having somebody else in our lives that only he can provide, a woman or a man who can fill that role in your life. And it's very important for us to pursue that when the time comes, if necessary. And if God calls us to singleness, hopefully he will surround us with family and friends that will at least not abandon us if we fall, that will help us in a time of need. And so that is definitely, it cannot be overstated how important it is. And that first part that says, though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand him. When it says two can withstand him, I'm thinking like we can withstand the enemy, the adversary's attacks. But I think that this might be speaking in a more general sense. But whether it's talking about the devil, or like in spiritual warfare, whether it's talking about physically withstanding somebody attacking them and overpowering them, whatever the case may be, a companion will help you. If it's a legal battle, if it's a physical battle, if it's a spiritual battle, you have a prayer warrior by your side. And so I couldn't really emphasize that anymore. It's important. Verse 13 says, better a poor and a wise youth than an old and foolish king who will be admonished no more. 14 says, for he comes out of prison to be king, although he was born in his kingdom. So this is an interesting transition here. When you're an old and foolish king in this sense, I'm not sure if King Solomon is talking about a specific instance here, or if it's more of like a hypothetical. I think it's hypothetical, like in just general sense. The time that we're here is very finite, as we've discussed. It's a frail life that we lead. It's a vapor, right? And so if you're an old and foolish king, you have taken for granted how far you've come. You have to be thankful that God puts you in a place of authority. And as soon as you get complacent, or in other words, old and foolish, especially that foolish part, it's not going to help you very much. People are going to start to resent you or not appreciate you if you just sit back or enjoy pleasures and you don't do anything for the people anymore. You don't do anything to make your kingdom better, to make things better politically with your potential adversaries, other kingdoms and so forth. And so when it says better a poor and wise youth, that is somebody that has future potential. So they're poor in station, but they have the desire to grow in not necessarily in rank to be a king, but they definitely want to pursue some sort of excellence if they're wise. They want to be prudent. They want to make the right decisions. And so that's why it says better a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king. An old and foolish king is about to meet his end, and he's not meeting it in a graceful way. It's not painting a picture of like, oh, this is a king who's leaving a legacy of love and peace behind him, who handled a situation of conflict with grace and helped us avoid it. Or it is not listing accomplishments that he made on his way out. It's more like saying, no, this is how he messed up and this is how he is. And so it's a different kind of descriptor. And when we go to verse 14, when it says, for he comes out of prison to be king, although he was born poor in his kingdom. That's just elaborating on the poor and wise youth. Like, even if you start in a prison and eventually become king, your trajectory is a difficult one. It's hard to climb. Think about the socioeconomic ladder here in America. It's very hard to climb. So imagine back then when they had systems in place where people who were born, if you were born into certain families, advantages that others may not necessarily have, but also there was no opportunities, or very few opportunities, to go down and up in class and in rank. If you weren't part of a certain lineage, you had no right to the throne. It's not like anybody could rise in politics and potentially become even the president of the United States. Like, who's to say somebody can't do that here in America? Anybody can do that. I mean, it's possible. It's within the realm of possibility for a lot of people. And so whether they pursue that or not, and put in the work that it takes and the effort that it takes, and God gives them that opportunity, is another story. But just to have that idea that, man, here in America, we're so blessed to have that flexibility, and not only in gaining or losing in terms of what we make monetarily, but also what we do in terms of just in influence, right? And so it's amazing that we've never been in such a time where somebody can become a millionaire or billionaire towards the latter part of their life here in America because of that flexibility of being able to climb up and down the social ladder. And so that's something that we have in the modern era, that compared to the past, it's a totally different situation. And some other thing to note before I move on from verse 14 is that even a king back then, with all his luxuries and with all his benefits and advantages, is living no better than a poor person in the modern era. I mean, we have so many blessings in terms of innovation, transportation, the operations for everything from producing and distributing food, so warehouses, the ability to fly in an airplane. Things like this are literally a night and day difference compared to the past, whereas back then you had to struggle even if you were a nobility. So even a poor person today, interestingly enough, lives in a more luxurious situation than a king in many respects. So that's something to be thankful to God for that kind of progress in our society over time. Verse 15 says, I saw all the living who walk under the sun. They were with the second youth who stands in his place. 16. There was no end of all the people over whom he was made king. Yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and grasping for the wind. So as we close out here in Ecclesiastes 4, we see that in the end, well, basically, let's see what second youth refers to. It says, this refers to the legitimate successor to the old king, as opposed to the poor youth who rises on his ability to reign. So somebody who replaces the king in terms of lineage and succession may not be qualified for the role, whereas the poor and wise youth who rose because of ability is more prepared and more suited to reign. But a lot of times there's obviously the injustice of the fact that the one most suited to reign, or the one who deserves responsibility and authority, often gets overlooked by another who is preferred for some reason or has some kind of connection. And so that's something to consider. And it's an injustice, but it's one that we can't always fix, and it's not always rectified. But in the end, God is keeping perfect score, so we don't have to worry about things like that. It's just something to be aware of, though, because it does happen, and we just need to deal with it. This is part of life, right? And so when it says in verse 16, there was no end of all the people over whom he was made king, yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. That part where it says, yet those who come afterward will not rejoice in him. His legacy as a king, if he becomes old and foolish, especially towards the latter part of his reign, his legacy may be tarnished a great deal. I mean, depending on how foolish we're talking here and what kind of compromises we're talking about here, especially if they're compromises related to how the people might suffer because of his indiscretions. And so it's very important that if you want to live a godly lifestyle, to think about, what am I going to leave my children? What kind of legacy am I going to leave behind as a man or as a woman, like in this life? what am I going to leave behind that will continue for a time after I pass away? And eventually the memory of everyone fades over the generations, no matter how famous you are or what you do. But in the sight of God as a believer, I've said this before, your legacy is imprinted in God's heart. I mean, it's something that cannot be taken away from you if you've done God's work and if you lived for eternity. And so I think that's the closing idea that one can garner from something like this, is that if you live for the moment, it's very fleeting. But if you consider what ramifications it might have in a context of forever, continuous eternity, then that's what really motivates you to do the things that the Bible commands us to do, to share the gospel, to evangelize, to fulfill the Great Commission in that respect, to praise God and bring Him glory in everything we do, and to fight the good fight of faith and feed His children. And those are the types of things that have lasting value, that transcend this life. So those are the things worth the biggest focus. I appreciate you stopping by. I pray that you would be blessed by all these teachings. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue through Ecclesiastes 5, or, like I said last time, perhaps pivot to another chapter, but we'll see. Hopefully, either way, something good will come of it. God bless. Please feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like updates on future postings. And hit the like button. Smash that like button if you liked and enjoyed the video. And comment down below if you want to start a discussion. I really appreciate you guys sending me emails, putting comments in once in a while. And so, until next time, take care.